Hey guys, Shay here with Kushology, again, your resident canna nurse. Today I wanted to talk to you guys again about edibles. I know we've talked about this before, I know we've touched on it in our reels, but let's get into it a little bit more today. Almost every day I have someone come in and ask about edibles. Whether it's why do they hit me so hard, or why do I take them and they don't work? I've had people come in and ask, I'm scared to start them because I've heard horror stories. All of that is valid. Edibles are a very, very specific experience, and they're entirely different than any of your other consumption methods. With inhalants, you're gonna get a pretty quick high. It's gonna come off in a couple of hours, pretty stable. Same with your tinctures. Even though that's something that's technically absorbed in the body, it doesn't break down quite the same, so you still get a different kind of high. Edibles are processed through the liver and through your stomach, meaning it can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 4 hours before you feel those edibles. And especially if you're new to using, this can be a really scary thing and you may not know what to expect. Something else that we misunderstand with edibles is just how concentrated they are. When we sit down and talk about our measurements and we talk about our THC content, speaking in the grams and speaking in the terms of flower, a full gram joint may be 18%, anywhere up to 20, sometimes up to 30%. But that's still 1 gram of that high THC. Now in an edible, those grams are much higher. That THC concentration is much higher, closer to 89 to 92% in most cases, and is then bumped up to be past that full gram. So you have to realize that for every milligram that you're eating of an edible is the equivalent of 1 gram of flour. So if you sit down to have a 10 milligram edible, that's the equivalent of you sitting down to smoke 10 full gram joints back to back to back to back to back to back to back. So that's a lot. If that's not something that you can consume as a normal, just inhaling user, edibles is a very different experience. So be careful. Something else that people don't know about edibles or don't really give any credit to is what they're made with and how they break down in your body. When we sit down and talk about how to make edibles, you've got your distillates, you have your oils, but primarily we use butter. Then it's cooked into whatever your choice is. It may be a gummy, it could be chocolate, it could be a cookie, a Rice Krispie, lollipop, drink, you name it. Once it's in an edible, they're all gonna break down about the same until we look at their binding agent. So anything dairy-based, fat-based, is going to affect your high in a much more elevated sense. THC loves fat. So it's gonna bind to that and break down a whole lot faster, and it's gonna give you a much more intense high. It might shorten it by about 30 minutes or so. Some studies show us up to an hour, but it's gonna be a much more intense high, and you're more likely to remetabolize at that point too. Meaning that once you start to feel a little bit better, the next time you have a meal, especially if it's a high-fat meal, you'll remetabolize and you'll get high all over again. Now, as far as protein and breaking it down, it's gonna break it down a little bit slower. So I encourage especially my first-time users or people who just aren't comfortable using edibles, choose that steak dinner, something with potatoes in it, something a little heartier, because it'll bind to that and it'll break down a lot slower. And it won't hit you as intensely. You're still gonna get high, but it's not gonna hit you out of the blue, and it's not going to be quite as intense for you either. The most important thing, however, as important as all of this information is though, is if you're going to be experimenting with edibles, if you're gonna be trying them for the first time, please get CBD on hand. We've already talked about the entourage effect. We've already talked about how important it is for your body to process THC alongside that CBD so that you know exactly how you're gonna feel. This is when it's the most important. Because that milligram is so high of THC and such a high concentration, when you're not used to it, this is where we start to see people who get the hyperemesis, where they throw up and they can't stop, where we see them having the heart racing and their heart panics and they can have cardiac tissue damage. This isn't because cannabis is bad for us, but this is because that THC content is way too high with no CBD. So pick up some CBD. We have plenty of options here. We've got the gummies, we have tinctures, and those options are available. Pick something out, just so you have it on hand. Not everybody needs it, not everybody wants that. But keep yourself safe, keep yourself in control, and advocate for yourself by having that on hand so that you know exactly what you're taking and you're in control. Edibles can be a blast. Edibles can also really be an excellent option for people medically that can't smoke. but they can be scary. So come and talk to us. We have tons of options. We have lots of education resources for you guys to take home. We can have some conversations. So come and see us.